Aspiring Hollywood is not just about budding young filmmakers looking for advice and a helping hand. It's about all the components of the entertainment business, including fantastic musicians, such as my next guest, Jack Hale, who's passionately working to constantly develop his current vintage jazz show of the Roaring '20s and the Great Depression. He will also talk about his current musical score, Vintage Jazz Style. Jack, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So, tell me about yourself. What is it exactly that you're doing? Vintage jazz style. I mean, what is that?
There's a growing community in Southern California that's really been going on since the '90s, when we had the boom of Big Bad Voodoo Daddy and the jump swing era, the retro jazz swing. Well, that pretty much tailed off. But these same people are still enthused about going back to the original 20s and 30s dance. And this is a community growing faster and faster. There's ballrooms all over Southern California. Downtown is supporting the clubs, doing vintage jazz. There's 20 styles, 30 styles, swing ballrooms playing all the big band music. And it's a fascinating community, and we need more people to get involved in this to keep it motivated.
That's great. So what, do they listen to you? Do they get up and dance? And do they, what's a typical event?
They get up and dance. If it's a theater show, it depends on the venue, if there's room to dance, and if it's involving the audience to If it's a small club, they're there to listen and drink and listen to some cool jazz. Typically the ballrooms and the larger restaurants that have floors, they generally have dance lessons for an hour before the band comes on. So that's typical. Many of these people involved in the community sign up for monthly lessons so they can learn their Lindy Hop, their jitterbug, foxtrot steps, the traditional ballroom type places, they're learning traditional cha-cha, rumba. It's fun, and of course the TV has expanded that too with Dance with the Stars and all this stuff. So people want to get out, can we really dance to this kind of music? The answer is yes.
Now that's a reality show in the making right there.
Absolutely, it is reality, it's happening.
Aspiring Hollywood is, like I said in the introduction, it's not just for filmmakers or actors, or it's for everybody in the entertainment business, including musicians such as yourself that has so much experience with playing music and composing music that can offer advice to aspiring musicians. So what I'd like to know is, how did you get started? When did you get started?
I got started as a small kid. My older brother was playing guitar. My dad played a little guitar. So I was learning off Beatles songbooks when I was 8 years old. So that was my beginning. I got into what's now today classic rock. Eric Clapton and all the early 60s bands was my style of picking guitar. So I knew all that blues licks and all Led Zeppelin later in high school, The Who. But always my parents were amateur jitterbug champions.
Oh, wow.
So there was always big band music in the house, and I didn't really appreciate it that much, but I knew it was good stuff. You know, I was the typical rebel. I want to play rock and roll at the time. Well, it's the swing stuff that stuck with me through all the years, and that's what I do today. Even though, I got the chops for the rocks, I'll go out and jam with some guys, but it's the swing and the jazz is my passion, the serious music.
Right, so a young aspiring musician would say, okay, great, so I like playing the guitar as well, but how do I get noticed? What do I have to do to get my first, as you call it in the business, my first gig, right?
There's difference. There's so many singer-songwriters today that, you hook on some good songs, you get a couple of good musicians behind you, you might get a hit and you might get discovered. The more practical way to get into the business as a working person, you got to study, you got to read music, you got to read anything. The jobs in the music industry are not what they were 20, 30 years ago because of the computer. So they don't hire large studio bands to do orchestration. Sure, the great movies do, they have the budget for it, but a lot of the TV, the music you hear is not live music, it's some person on the computer.
Now also, and forgive me for interrupting, but YouTube, again, it's giving a lot of opportunity for musicians to get noticed as well, right? So times have changed a little bit, but I want to hear about the traditional way of actually getting a job, please.
You still have to study, you have to read everything. There's competition. There's horn players, guitar players, everybody's out there. Really, the point is to study good music. Go with the jazz. Here's how it is in the industry, or even before you get into the industry. At the college level, if you go into the music program, it's all swing music. They have you're going to study classical, your harmony theory and all this stuff, but they also have the jazz bands, and they're playing 20s, 30s, 40s music. Unfortunately, they're not teaching the right improvisation methods that I feel should be done, but that's the music. So whether you're a rock and roll, rap, or whatever it is, if you don't get into the reading aspect and the study, what are the notes in this chord, for instance, you really have no chance in the business unless you just come up as an artist and come up with some great lyrics and hits, which is an issue all to the side. We're now talking about the ones behind the scenes. Yeah,
the traditional
musician in the background trying to get gigs at the clubs and whatever. Fortunately, the club scene is looking pretty good today. And as the economy opens up more and more, I can see it loosening up on the private gigs. We do a lot of weddings and this stuff.
Yeah.
And
now we're talking about you doing music from the Great Depression, and it feels like we're in the Great Depression right now.
We're not
right?
far from it.
Right.
Absolutely.
So it's a good thing that you're actually making people happy when they come to see you.
Yes, and the Depression era and the Roaring '20s, basically it's the music of boardwalk empire. At least the 20s portion. The 30s, of course, is a little later. It's a little sadder type of jazz, as it should be during the American times. 20s was very happy, a lot of Charleston, Lindy Hop dancing, and there's a big crowd. There's clubs downtown that are supporting this. I'm pushing it because what I found through the years is that the modern jazz musician, and I'm not including the masters, the ones that play anything, but just your typical college student, your typical jazz player around town cannot play vintage jazz. They never learned correctly because the system that you use in the schools nowadays is, I don't want to get technically into the music, but it's more modal improvisation instead of going to the roots of the chords, which is critical in 20s and 30s jazz to know what are the chords you're playing. Don't be just blowing notes up and down. So that's what we emphasize. Traditional jazz, it's not Dixie, we play a Chicago style, which is like the gangster period. A little dance step, it's not a 2-beat like Dixie. It's 2 and 4 beat, but it's jazzy, it's for Charleston dance and Lindy Hop, but the way the horns sound, it sounds like Dixie. It's very exciting music. You know, it's happy music, it's Disneyland type of music also.
It's a fascinating world because it's still part of entertainment. It's just so different from filmmaking. You know, it's just, in my opinion, I think being a musician is even harder than trying to be a filmmaker or an actor. Do you disagree, or do you?
I don't know, because there's millions of actors that are tried to get into business just like the musicians. So I'll give it an equal calling there. Yeah, it's very difficult. You got to know your trade.
So tell me about your projects. You know, what are you working on right now?
What I'm doing right now is I just finished scoring The Wizard of Oz from beginning to end. And I have this set up for 2 productions. One is a full 25-member crew involving other popular people in the vintage jazz community. One being the Hollywood Hot Shots, which are Lindy Hop world champion dance troupe, and the Satin Dolls, which is a local Hollywood dance troupe that does tap dance all of the 30s and 40s and sing like the Andrews Sisters. So it's like a 1940s canteen type show. So we're integrating all this. My lead singer is the popular Ginger Polly, and who is Betty Boop by character. So that's always a fun thing to see that come up on stage and watch her do her Betty Boop act. It's fascinating, and everybody loves it, regardless of what genre you're in. My next one is The Sound of Music. So let's go back to The Wizard of Oz for a second, because everybody knows the musical. That's why it works. Everybody knows the song. The audience can come in and dance if it's a large enough place. We have a large venue that a couple hundred people can get on the dance floor. So that's kind of nice.
That is. Yeah.
Yes. It's a smaller club. I also have the same type of show knocked down for about 10 people. Much scaled down, of course. Then Jack has to sing a lot more of the parts as well, playing a lot of the Munchkins, for instance, that kind of thing. But it works, and the music is there. We don't play it just like in the film. It's the same songs, you can sing along with it, but the beat, and there's a little improv there. We're getting that little Dixie and that Chicago jazz of the 20s and 30s mixed in with it. The musicians have a blast because they're not sitting there reading music. I open it up and let's play jazz, let's have fun with it. the horns are doing their thing, they love it. I mean, I have a list a mile long of musicians who would love to play in this band because it lets them play jazz.
Yeah,
nice.
that's wonderful. What advice would you give to an aspiring musician, that's trying to perhaps do the same thing that you're doing?
Regardless of what music you like, study jazz. Because the jazz, really, I'm serious, the jazz musician can play any music of the world, anything. Doesn't matter where it comes from, they can hear it. They can adapt to it quickly. Never seen any rock player going in there to play jazz like a jazz master. Never happened, never will. But I've seen thousands of jazz players that can play every lick a rock player can do, and the blues. So that's how it works. The blues comes from jazz. If you know jazz, you're going to play blues better than the typical blues guy. It doesn't matter. If you're into just some country music, whatever, you'll just know how simple it is. The simplicity of the 20s and 30s jazz is what makes it so difficult to play, actually. That the modern jazz musician has studied too much and missed the foundation of studying the root chords, like a country musician would do. A good country picker is playing your triads. A good 20s style jazz picker has to work out those same triads. And that's where the jazz musician has lost it. They can't do it.
Yeah.
I mean, they can get into it. They can cram a couple weeks and get it back, but say, okay, play this on the spot. No matter how great they are, in my experience as a modern jazz musician, blowing up and down the scales and stuff is not the style. You don't sound like you belong in the 1920s. I need musicians who sound like they were born in 1910, and that's what my guys do.
Wow, that's just, I mean, that's so fascinating to me. This whole music world is just, I love it. I watch all the music competitions, the singers and all that. I'm horrible. If I were to sing anything, I'd clear a room really quick. but and that's why I have so much respect for you guys, because it takes real talent to be able to produce good music, and I know you do. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Where can we follow you?
Well, if you type Swingin' Sophisticats on Facebook, or my website is swinginsophisticats.com, and there you can link to audios, videos. We play on the first Monday of every month live at Alpine Village in Torrance. That's their Monday night, is their big dance, great dinners. Come on down. Otherwise, you could follow us and catch us more locally in LA. We play here in Burbank at Joe's, over on Magnolia.
And do people dress up like the 1920s and the 30s?
The clubs downtown, they push it. They do.
Oh, really?
The nightclubs downtown, they push it, and some of them, it is actually the code. The higher classes. We played the Edison a couple of weeks ago. You have to dress, they want you to dressing vintage.
That's
the
great.
Cicada Club downtown, you must dress 20s or you're not in there. So it's very nice, yes, and it's classy stuff.
Yeah, so there you go, folks. I mean, a great night out, and get entertained by vintage jazz.
Yes, it's a blast. And learn how to dance it. I tell you, the young people don't know, man, this stuff is fun. Check it out on the internet, watch some good old shows.
Well, we're going to keep following you and in your career and the great shows that you put together. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Been a pleasure. Good luck to all of you.
Thank you very much. And thank you guys for watching. Again, please visit us at aspiringhollywood.com as we bring you great interviews every single week with people like Jack here and our previous guests. Thank you again for watching, and see you next time.